Before the royal titles, the designer gowns, or the international press coverage, Meghan Markle was just another face in the sea of Hollywood hopefuls. She wasn't a duchess, she wasn't on magazine covers, she was a struggling actress hustling for bit roles and walking dogs between auditions. And back then, long before the palace gates opened, there was Trevor Engelson. Trevor wasn't some random ex from a short fling, he was Meghan's first husband, a successful Hollywood producer. Grounded, respected, and very much in love. They started dating in the early 2000s, both young and ambitious. She was still figuring out who she was, and he was already carving his space in the industry. Friends said they fit, at least in the beginning. It wasn't some whirlwind fantasy, it was real. They laughed together, traveled together, even weathered the long-distance mess when she landed the role of Rachel Zane on Suits and had to move to Toronto. Trevor went out of his way to stay close, flying up often, sending her thoughtful care packages, making real effort. Meghan, over time, just didn't. The breakup didn't come with a bang. It wasn't some dramatic cheating scandal or explosive fight. One day, Trevor was her husband. The next, he was holding a box with his wedding ring inside, mailed back to him with no note, no explanation, just silence. It caught everyone off guard. Friends said he was heartbroken, blindsided, but as time went on, things started clicking. There were red flags that didn't look red at the time. One of the biggest shocks came from something Meghan allegedly told him during their marriage, that she couldn't have biological children. For Trevor, that was a heavy, intimate truth. It shaped how he thought about their future, and he accepted it. He didn't question her. He didn't make her feel less than. He adjusted, loved her through it, and stood by her. That's what partners do. So imagine his confusion when years later, Meghan is suddenly announcing pregnancies in glossy photo spreads with Prince Harry. First Archie, then Lilibet. Not just rumors. Full-blown royal family-backed statements with sonograms and baby showers. Trevor didn't go to the press. He didn't trash her on social media, but he spoke privately, quietly. And what he said painted a very different picture than the one the public had been fed. It wasn't just about children. It was about trust. About being told something so defining, so final, and then watching that same truth unravel in public, with smiles and photo ops. People close to Trevor said he felt played, not because Meghan moved on, that's life, but because he was never sure whether the person he married had ever been completely honest with him. There's a quiet kind of pain that comes from realizing your memories might be real to only one of you. And Trevor's story, though shared in whispers, started making rounds among industry circles, producers, assistants, old colleagues, people who had crossed paths with Meghan before the spotlight, before the titles, and what they remembered was a woman who could shapeshift effortlessly depending on who she was talking to. It wasn't fake exactly, just adaptive, like someone always playing a role, adjusting the performance based on the audience. To be clear, Trevor never came out swinging. He didn't write a tell-all. He didn't go on a media tour. But even without cameras, his version of events started to carry weight, not because he was bitter, but because he was believable. This wasn't some fame-hungry ex. He had a career. He had moved on. But when he spoke, just enough, it forced people to pause and ask a deeper question. Who really is Meghan Markle? Trevor's silence had always been louder than any headline. He wasn't chasing attention, but people noticed when he finally started talking. Not in interviews or press junkets, but in quiet rooms with trusted friends. And what he said painted a picture far more complex than the one sold to the public. Meghan wasn't malicious, she wasn't cruel, but she was intentional, deliberate in every step she took, every connection she made, every exit she crafted. That's what stuck with people. Not just what she did, but how cleanly she did it. When she left Trevor, she didn't just end the marriage, she erased it. No public acknowledgement, no lingering friendships. She cut the cord and never looked back. And for someone like Trevor, who had poured everything into that relationship, that kind of vanishing act wasn't just painful, it was surreal. He had known Meghan in her rawest form, before stylists, press teams, and royal protocol. She used to cry on his shoulder about missed auditions, about feeling invisible in Hollywood. That version of her was vulnerable, even insecure. So when she suddenly became a polished public figure, unshakable in interviews, effortlessly composed, it felt like watching a stranger wear someone else's skin. People in the industry started remembering things. How Meghan was always polite, always charming, but also always climbing. She didn't climb the ladder one rung at a time, she looked for shortcuts. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Ambition is common in Hollywood, right? As the defense brought up 18 details of Hollywood, but with Meghan, it felt calculated, strategic, like she had a map no one else could see, and she was quietly checking off milestones. The producer boyfriend, the breakout role, the rebranding, the high-profile friendships. Then came Harry. And for those who knew her back in the LA days, the connection made a strange kind of sense. Meghan had always been drawn to status, not in a gold digger way, but in a what's next way. She wasn't someone content with staying put. She wanted more, always more. And once she got it, she didn't dwell. She moved forward and rarely circled back. That's why Trevor's story hit differently. He wasn't angry about losing her. He was confused about whether he'd ever really had her in the first place. There was also the timing. Meghan's rise happened fast. Suits gave her steady visibility, but it wasn't until she started dating Harry that her brand exploded. Overnight, she went from a mid-tier TV actress to a global headline, and with that came the reinvention. Suddenly, she wasn't just an actress, she was a humanitarian, a feminist icon, a symbol of modern royalty. That transformation didn't come out of nowhere, it was orchestrated, carefully curated, and people began to wonder how much of it was authentic? Meghan's defenders argued that people are allowed to grow, to evolve, to change, and they're right. But when each chapter of someone's life involves the total abandonment of the previous one, it starts to raise eyebrows. Trevor's version of Meghan wasn't about scandals or secrets. It was about a pattern. A quiet, consistent pattern of reinvention through disconnection, of emotional exits, of only staying as long as the relationship served a purpose. What made Trevor's account powerful wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't say. He wasn't accusing Meghan of lying. He never claimed to have all the answers, but he raised a question that no publicist could spin away. If someone can switch versions of themselves so smoothly, which version is real? And what happens to the people who loved the one she left behind? The Meghan that stood beside Prince Harry in royal portraits didn't cry in bathrooms over auditions. She didn't hustle for roles in background scenes or rehearse lines late into the night while eating ramen. That Meghan was gone, packaged away with her old life. But for people like Trevor and others who knew her back then, it wasn't just nostalgia, it was confusion. How does someone go from crying over rejection to redefining global media narratives like it was second nature? And more importantly, who was she when the cameras weren't around? What unsettled many wasn't that she changed, it was how cleanly she changed. The transitions were too smooth, almost rehearsed. When she became a royal, she mastered the press. When she became a mother, she mastered the narrative. Every image, every quote, every project carefully selected. And when Trevor's quiet revelations started making their way around, the image began to wobble. It wasn't just Trevor who started getting second glances. Former colleagues, industry assistants, even friends from her early years began quietly admitting that they'd felt disposable, like they were part of a chapter that had to be erased for the next one to look perfect. Meghan had a way of adapting to the room, the person, the opportunity. That's why it worked for a while. But eventually, the people left behind start talking, and when enough of them whisper the same thing, people start to listen. What made the situation even more complicated was the subject at the center of it all: children. You can brush off ambition, you can explain away social climbing, but when a marriage ends partly based on the belief that children aren't possible, and years later, children appear, that's not just awkward, that's emotional dynamite. Trevor never called her a liar. He didn't accuse her of faking anything, but he had lived with a belief, made life choices around it, adjusted his dreams to match it, and then watched those very dreams come true in someone else's story. Meghan's team moved fast. Behind the scenes, there were meetings, containment efforts, legal feelers were sent out to media outlets riding too close to the edge. Meghan didn't rage publicly. She never does. Her weapon is silence and optics. Smile, stay calm, stay collected, let people believe everything is under control. But those who know how Hollywood works, how image is crafted, recognize the urgency. This wasn't some baseless tabloid rumor. This came from the man who once loved her most. That's harder to fight. The public, once fiercely protective of Meghan, started feeling differently. The Oprah interview, the Netflix special, the endless headlines, it began to feel like performance. And Trevor's quiet, almost reluctant truth-telling, it hit different. Because it wasn't polished, it wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't meant to go viral, it was just honest. And that honesty cracked the surface of something carefully built. There's a reason people resonate with rawness. Not everyone needs a villain, but they do want the truth, or at least something that feels close to it. Trevor never claimed to know all of Meghan, but he knew enough to question the fairy tale. And once he did, others did too. Meghan may continue to shine, to evolve, to rebrand. That's what she does best. But for those who knew her before the cameras, the story won't be about betrayal or bitterness. It'll be about the version of her that never made it to the spotlight, the one who laughed differently, who cried easily, who wore struggle like second skin. That Meghan may be gone, but she wasn't forgotten. And no amount of press control can fully erase the echoes she left behind.